Hello, everyone. Ron here from L.T.L Tutoring Central, and I am back with another reading comprehension and discussion video. And this one is entitled Learning to Learn. I think that's very appropriate for L.T.L Tutoring Central, since that's what I've been doing for almost 30 years, is trying to teach people of all ages how to learn, learning to learn. And I have my book here. I don't know how well it's going to show up on screen. Teach myself with a question mark, teach myself with an exclamation mark. Self-taught learners do best, because I think that's true. I think that we can use many different tools like teachers and tutors and books and videos and podcasts, texts. But when we get right down to it, I'm trying not to pop here. It was really up to us, right? We need to learn how to learn. So I have not read this article yet. I'm very interested in it. I saw the title. I thought I've got to make a video of this. It's a fairly long article for the videos that I usually make. So hopefully I can get through it without choking, coughing, whatever. I've got my button here. I'll try to mute if I do have to, because I've been coughing a lot in recent years for some strange reason. Who knows? Just death creeping up, I think. But anyway, I really am excited to get into this. So just before we do, though, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, it really does help the channel a lot. Check for in the description, check for a link to the article original, so that you can go there if you want and check it out for yourself. Also check for links to the book, Teach Myself, and there'll be other links down there as well. And of course, check out the playlist. There's lots of playlists. There's one for reading comprehension and discussion, story time, and collocations, etc. So you might want to check those out too. I'm looking to hit the share here so we can open up the actual article. Here we go. Italian Journal of Sociology of Education. Learning to Learn, author Martina Vicentin. Author information, Department of Political Sciences, Law and International Studies, University of Padova, Italy. And there's contact information, how to cite. I'm not going to read all of that, but you can check it out. As I say, I'll put a link down below. I'm hoping this is large enough. I'm going to make it a bit bigger, just so you can see it easier on screen. Review of the book Learning to Learn, International Perspectives from Theory and Practice by Ruth Deacon Crick, Christina Stringer, and Kai Wren, Routledge, etc., etc. Okay, let's have a look. There has been an increasing interest in learning to learn, so L.T.L, L.2L, I'm thinking of my own. Learning to learn, that was one of the things. Oh, by the way, L.T.L tutoring, many people ask me, what does the L.T.L stand for? Learning to learn was one of the ideas, but my wife and I were sitting with pieces of paper and we were writing down all different ideas, and there were a lot of them, loving to learn, etc. That I don't even remember them all, but a lot of them were L.T.L. So that's where the name came from. Doesn't really mean anything, or maybe it means everything. I don't know. One of the basic skills for success in the knowledge society is the ability to learn. In education, at work, and throughout one's own individual and social life, learning to learn is a crucial issue for success in a complex, unpredictable, and challenging world we share. With increasingly rapid changes in the workplace, in part due to changing technology and as a result of changing societal needs in the context of globalization, citizens must learn to learn in order that they can maintain their full and continued participation in employment and civil society or risk social exclusion. European Commission, 2007. Okay, I'm going to make my comments brief in between because it's a fairly long text, but yes, changing technology. Of course, right now, this was written back in 2017, I think, we're dealing with AI technology coming in, and a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs, and what are we going to do? So we're still dealing with that, as well as other changes in computerization, etc. Robotics. In this context, learning to learn is a quintessential tool for lifelong learning, and thus education and training needs to provide the learning environment for the development of this competence for all citizens, including persons with fewer opportunities, those with special needs, and school dropouts. Throughout the whole lifespan, including preschool and adult learners, and through different learning environments, formal, non-formal, and informal, Fredrickson and Hoskins, 2007. It is one of the 8 competencies identified by the European Union in the Lisbon at the 2020 strategies. Learning to learn is the ability to pursue and organize one's own learning, either individually or in a group, in accordance with one's own needs and awareness of methods in order to learn successfully. This competence means gaining, processing, and assimilating new knowledge and skills, as well as seeking and making use of guidance. Learning to learn engages learners to build on prior learning and life experiences in order to use and apply knowledge and skills in a variety of contexts at home, at work, in education, and training. And I think this is saying what I started off with before we even entered the text, is that there's multiple tools, many tools that you can use to help you become your own best learner or teacher, I should say both. I think all teachers should be learners and all learners should be teachers, because when you teach someone, you learn a lot yourself, and you learn new things, but you also relearn things that you maybe have forgotten. Now, I've forgotten where I stopped, so I'm going to start here again. Learning to learn engages learners to build on prior learning and life experiences in order to use and apply knowledge and skills in a variety of contexts. Oh yes, I read that. At home, at work, in education, and training. Motivation and confidence are crucial to an individual's competence. EU's recommendation, Key Competence, 2006 P2. The European Union maintains a keen interest in this topic, as demonstrated by the European network of policymakers and several working groups on key competencies, including the creation of the European Network on Learning to Learn. I'm not going to read all the names. You can see them. Internationally, Learning to Learn is emerging as a focus for school improvement and as a foundation for lifelong and life-wide learning. Internationally, L2L, they've got here, keep saying L.T.L because of my name, is considered one of the 8 key competencies needed to compete in the global economy, but also a crucial factor for individual and social well-being. There have also been a number of recent studies carried out on learning to learn. The University of Helsinki has a part of the Finnish project Life as Learning, L-E-A-R-N, organized a number of studies on learning to learn. Within the British project Teaching and Learning Research Program, questions related to learn have been raised. Within the PISA surveys, PISA, a special study took place in 2003 on problem solving, OECD 2004. A wealth of research has been flourishing on this key educational goal in recent years. The aim of this review is to present the innovative approach to learning to learn. I think there's a few little, what I would call grammar errors here. I would say to present an innovative approach to learning to learn. Anyway, in fact, this book draws on leading international contributors to provide a cutting-edge overview of current thinking on research policy and implementation in both formal and informal learning environments. However, what learning to learn is exactly and what its constituting elements are is a much debated issue. The main theoretical and operational models based on the approach, cognitive, psychological, or sociocultural, do not agree on a single definition of learning to learn. Nevertheless, shows common points, attention to effective motivational aspects, and socio-relational situated learning. Current research paradigms of learning to learn refer to metacognition, the socio-constructivism, lifelong learning, and assessment studies. The book is organized in 2 parts, theory and international case studies. What unites them is represented by 2 key themes: the complexity to be addressed in researching learning to learn, and the values of international views and contributions. Learning to learn is a complex process that involves all society and each person, because it's about human beings becoming self-organizing agents of their own life, and the challenge is to create the conditions for this to happen. Yes, I think that's true. I think that I'll just say a little bit here that I was going to save to the end, but then I'll probably forget it when I get to the end. The idea and some of what they were talking about here, I believe, is that if you become able to do this, not entirely on your own, everything we gain from other people and other research and other thought. But if we can learn to learn by ourselves, using these other tools is much more effective than simply going into a classroom, sitting down. I call it the milk milk container idea that students think if I show up, if I sit down and I listen to the teacher, maybe I take notes, but a lot of students don't even do that anymore. Then that's all I have to do. That's it. I'm done. And it's, well, you're really not learning very much. You will remember a little bit maybe, but it's not really all. That's not really how you learn, and that's not learning how to learn. Sorry. Therefore, the book begins with introducing what is learning to learn. The literature search was carried out using the following keywords: learning to learn, learning competence, competency, learning how to learn, learning about learning, independent learning, and so on and so on. Despite the analysis of 40 definitions, and 37,064 documents, the concept remains partial or flus. For that, the author argues the idea of outline a meta definition that try to summarize the personal, pedagogical, and learning trajectory, learning elements highlighted in the huge analyzed literature. Learning to learn is the executive process of control of learning conceivable as a disposition to engage deeply in learning, which bestows individuals with increasingly higher command over modes, time, and space of their own learning. Such a process evolves in a developmental and lifelong trajectory with the ultimate goal of making sense of reality. So it is just not a mere instrument for surviving in working life, but it goes into the deep meaning of human development and human flourishing. Caring for our brains also involves making other lifestyle choices, and even if there is a persistent disagreement around this concept, the definition proposed by Stringer is useful in order to proceed for an operationalization of the concept. To deepen this discussion, Chapter 2 reflects on crucial questions about aspects of learning to learn. Conceptual change, reasoning development, and critical thinking are complementary aspects of cognitive development and learning to learn. Education at any phase must lead and support the students to develop and refine these skills. Curriculum, instruction methods, and moment-to-moment teaching must adapt to every student. That is a tricky one with the number of students in schools and classrooms. It's one people have been wrestling with for a very long time. In my private tutoring, I am able to have it a little bit easier because I'm not doing as many students at once. This is the core of a good learning to learn approach. A school for all that becomes a school for everyone. This is the message of the chapter. Chapter 3, try to going into the debate, there's some language issues here, around learning to learn. Even if it is clear that the dominant theories that studied the mind since the last 2 centuries do not suffice to explicate learning to learn approach, the author outlines a complex, holistic understanding of learning to learn and the conditions necessary to support it. So maybe this is the most important chapter of the book. Crick accepts the challenge to strengthen a system architecture for learning to learn because it is crucial for everyone, educators, teachers, students, in what is so-called learning society. Donald Schoen, 1998, the great theorist of the learning society, affirms that we must learn to understand, guide, influence, and manage these transformations. We must make the capacity for undertaking them integral to ourselves and to our institutions. We must, in other words, become adept at learning. We must become able not only to transform our institutions in response to changing situations and requirements, we must invent and develop institutions which are learning systems. That is to say, systems capable of bringing about their own continuing transformation. Yes, I think that's true. I think that just as a student can become sort of stale and just sit there and expect to be fed information, a school can do the same, have the same problem, or any institution can have the same problem. It gets sort of stuck in doing, this is what we do, and this is what we've done, and this is what we continue to do because this is what we've done, and this is what we do. So you have to, I think they're suggesting here that you have to make it a learning system so that it continues to transform with changing technology, changing times, changing social mores, etc. At least that's what I'm drawing out of it. This is the purpose of learning to learn. The idea of the development of competence is important for a student, for a citizen, in order to be able to utilize inter and intrapersonal resources to engage in with the world in real-world challenge. Becoming a competent lifelong learner is the purpose of learning to learn, and at its heart, it is about enabling the individual to appropriate their own purpose in learning. A key part of the teacher's lesson is in providing feedback and learning loop for learners for the development of learning power. It is not an isolated process. As Bateson reminds us, learning to learn is a sort of deutero-learning. Bateson introduced the concept of deutero-learning just to explain the process of learning to learn. It means the acquisition of certain habits of thought and action. It's an inside-outside model in which the student becomes able to change, correct him per him process of learning in order to be more aware of himself, herself, for skillful engagement with the world. I'm just going to stop for a second and make a comment. There are a lot of grammar problems here. They should have sent it to Ron. Me. I could have helped them with this. So I'm trying to correct some of them as I read, but it's very difficult because this is the very first time I've read this. So to do it, as I'm rolling through, it's tricky. I'll try to pick up the ones that I can. All right, back to the text. Therefore, learning to learn is a journey, an unisolated process in which there is present strong pedagogy characterized by a strong understanding of the processes and the relationship that are significant to learn. It is a process competence that enables a person to respond productively to uncertain and risk and to develop a resilience to withstand personal, professional, and social challenges. The section continues discussing key elements of learning to learn. I'm not sure how you say that name. Alberici and Renzo focus their attention on learning to learn as a fundamental resource for personal and social development. Learning to learn is interpreted as an essential capacity for all that facilitates the development of democracy. According to the authors, if we are able to read learning to learn as a lifelong learning skill to adapt to our lives, it could become a strategic and empowering tool for everyone. Even if it can't be defined once and for all or accomplished permanently or to be achieved merely through and appropriate learning processes, but it implies an ever-changing human condition rolling through the life of an individual. I'm going to stop for a second and make a comment again. Yes, I think that's true. I think that learning to learn or just learning in general is not meant to stop because you left grade school or because you left high school or because you left college or because you left university. It shouldn't be the end of learning just because you got out of an institution or out of a school. Learning should be lifelong. And I think for your own personal growth, I think it makes you feel good. I think it makes people healthier. I think it helps lift people out of depression and anxiety. It can create anxiety when you're doing exams. I get that. I understand that. But it also can help when you learn something, when you achieve something, it makes you feel so good. It also makes, I mentioned democracy in here. It also just makes the citizens more capable, more able to reason and use logic. And I think that's very important. I think it's something that we need to keep in mind. So back to the text. Chapter 5 implies some insights from China. Confucius said, I don't know, CTMATM, 135, study without thought is labor lost. Thought without study is dangerous. Very good quotation. I could go on. Maybe I'll do that quotation as a separate video because I do that. I do quotations in videos, so I may do that. When referring to his own way of learning, he said, select what is good and follow it. Thus, he saw learning as a process of observation of some type of subject matter, whether it be books, objects, or people, followed by reflection that somehow changed one. He saw learning as a highly personal and therefore highly individual activity. I fully agree with Confucius here. He seemed to feel once awakened by any kind of real learning, this process would be repeated by the student. Confucius was probably the first to have developed a theory around the idea of learning to learn. He emphasized that learning is a form of habit through you can acquire, or that you can acquire, the moral virtues, values, and attitudes for learning, So learning should be oriented to a higher morality and contribute to society. That sentence needs some work, but anyway, the ideas are amazing. I really do like the article, but there are some issues. Cultivating a passion for learning across the life course, making meaning for learning, learning by doing, creating harmonious learning relationships are the key elements that characterizes learning to learn according to Confucius, I think they mean there. Yeah. Nowadays, the effects of Confucian teachings on the learning to learn in Chinese people are still present. The last decade saw a number of educational initiatives that encourage inquiry-based learning and learning-centered education in China. You can't really change the heart without telling a story, said Martha C. Nussbaum, and it's true. So here lay the importance of the second part of the book that is on a series of case studies described from chapter 6 to chapter 14. Chapter 6 deals again with Chinese learners' world. It considered how family and preschools could help in promoting children's learning to learn skills. Chapter 7 presents an analysis of a learning to learn change initiative within the state education system in South Australia. Teaching for effective learning is the key of the chapter. It shows that school reform, which is driven by an emphasis on learning and the attendant attention to relationships and cultural change, can affect school level change. Chapter 8 is about developing a framework for learning to learn in Finland and a tool for its assessment. In the Finnish framework, learning to learn is defined as the ability and willingness to adapt to novel tasks, activating one's mastery of thinking and the perspective of hope by means of maintaining one's cognitive and affective self-regulation in and of learning action. 120,000 students have participated in the different national, municipal, and school level assessments between 1996 and 2013, providing one of the largest data sets worldwide of the competences and learning-related attitudes of students of different ages, gathered with statistically comparable instruments. This chapter is quite interesting because it presents a 16-year-old tradition of work between education policy and educational practice. Indeed, it presents the inclusion of both the cognitive and the affective components of learning in their role of fostering new learning and as outcomes of education, has given new insight into the development of the relationship between students' cognitive competence, learning-related attitudes, and scholastic achievement through the school years. I'll just say a little comment here. If you can, and I know it's not easy, and I'm not saying there's a magic button, but if you can get students to want to learn more, if they become their own best teachers and they're learning to learn, they will come to class more ready. They will build stronger relationships with others who want to learn. It is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way. I think that's important. I think that's sort of what's happening here. This article is very good, and it touches on some of the ideas that it's reviewing. Unfortunately, of course, just because of the nature of the article, it is also giving a lot of names and lists that maybe some of my viewers are thinking, well, that's not very helpful. I need to read the original book, but that will be much longer than what I can do on the video. But this is giving us some very good idea of what kind of studies have been done, what kind of research is ongoing. So I'm enjoying it. I hope you are too. Chapter 9 is about the Spanish approach to learning to learn and how it has been developed in Spanish educational policy. They propose a definition of learning to learn as a strategic activity whose development would require the students to be aware of A, their reasons and intentions, B, their own cognitive capabilities, and C, the demands of the academic tasks. Besides this, they should be able to D, control their resources, and E, regulate their subsequent performance. Biggs, 1988. So to be a good student means to a certain extent to learn to become aware of one's own mind and of the level of one's own understanding. According to this way, learning to learn reflects intellectual and individual features, but also motivational, affective, and social aspects. Since 1990, the Spanish curriculum included many of the characteristics of the concept of learning to learn in the law of general organization of the educational system. Thus, the essential educational goal is expressed in terms of competencies, and within them, those that refer to the knowledge of the cognitive processes themselves and their conscious control. Martin and Cole, 2003. Learning to learn is learning a new way of thinking about learning that involves more than simply accumulating information. Yes, it's kind of what I mentioned before. It's not just going and sitting in class. It involves asking why, questioning consequences, taking responsibility for the processes of learning, and engaging in learning as a collective enterprise. The purpose of Chapter 10 is to analyze the theoretical implications for a school improvement program conceived within the ESF, or European Social Funds. Evaluation in a southern Italian middle school. The author, through a diachronic literature review of school effectiveness and improvement models and a brief analysis of Italian school self-evaluation, tries to answer this crucial question. What should we focus on in order to improve students' learning outcomes? The answer is a theoretical approach to school improvement that aims for coherence of practices and is grounded in learning to learn for students, teachers, school, and community organizations. The novelty of this approach lies in the overranching, it doesn't sound right, sociocultural constructivist epistemology that attempts to inform all subsequent principles and actions. Chapter 11 moves a step towards a 360-degree assessment model to support learning to learn. Data are presented to demonstrate that the best methods are those that use a collaborative 360-degree assessment approach, contextualized within local contexts and cultures. With a 360-degree assessment approach, all stakeholders in the learning process are given the opportunity to provide their perspectives on the extent to which the student is experiencing a positive learning environment and instructional practices that meet their learning needs. Chapter 12 is on learning to learn in practice in non-formal education. So we are now entering page 8 of 11, just to let you know, we are getting there. The author focuses his attention on the implication of learning to learn, on the roles of learners and educators. The starting point is in the field of European non-formal education program through the analysis of 2 projects for adult education and youth work. According to the author, the competence to plan and organize your own learning is a necessary and vital competence for engaging our challenging times. Often, the experience in traditional education system leaves learners with a negative perception of learning. So the main challenge for teachers and educators is having the belief and trust that learners are best placed to know their own learning needs and being able to facilitate the path that the learner has chosen. Yes, they do need assistance with that. The author draws some findings from 2 projects in order to go beyond paradoxes of traditional school system. They are 4 fields of competence. 1, awareness of self as a learner. 2, organizing, planning one's learning. 3, learning with others. 4, reflection, reviewing, and self-assessment. That's a good list. Educators may be inspired by self-directed learning and committed to enabling their learners to take responsibility for their own learning. Self-responsible learners have to be given the responsibility for their own learning, but at the same time, trainers have the task to create a constructive atmosphere that motivates the participants. To find the right balance is far from easy. As a result of this work with youth projects, some tools such as self-perception inventories, self-assessment forms, and personal development plans have been developed to support learners. At the end of the chapter, the author reflects on what makes a good social climate for learning in order to outline the conditions that encourage people to be open to change and for taking initiative and getting active. Linking to others and confronting self-limiting perceptions, working in small and big groups, and so on. Reflections on New Zealand experience is the issue of the second to last chapter. New Zealand has been at the forefront of both educational research and futures thinking in education. The learner is considered as a whole person because learning to learn is thought as a learning to do and to be, not just to know. This is reflected internationally in the UNESCO pillars of learning: learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. The authors argue that students cannot leverage the potential for lifelong learning in the absence of a strategic awareness of how to develop, access, and activate any kind of resources to support their learning. This implies that learning will require additional resources, support, expertise, input from a much wider range of people. Teachers ought not to be the only people from whom young people learn. Learning needs to be more connected with the community. Yes, learn from everyone if you possibly can. And I think if you are learning to learn, if you are that kind of learner, you will learn from anyone. I learn from I have students of all ages, but I have many very young students, and some of them don't believe that I learn from them all the time, but I do. Every time I'm teaching, I am learning from them, probably as much or more than they are learning from me. And I hope that one day they will become, uh, you know, learners that can teach themselves and continuing that lifelong learners, and that they will be able to learn from anyone, and they will be able to help others to learn and to learn how to learn. It starts to get complicated. All right, teachers still need strong pedagogical knowledge, but they also need to be able to collaborate with other people who can provide specific kinds of expertise, knowledge, or access to learning opportunities in community contexts. The last chapter deals with Indigenous Australians, describing 3 case studies in Learning to Learn rather. The author outlines how each study began with the intention of transitioning from a training model of education to a learning to learn model that champions a self-learning process. The utilities from these studies come from a range of insights that highlighted the need for flexibility and responsiveness in learning to learn processes. Learning is in the relationships between people. Learning is in the conditions that bring people together and organize a point of contact that allows for particular pieces of information to take on a relevance. Without the points of contact, without the system of relevancies, there is not learning and there is little memory, right? Learning does not belong to individual persons, but to the various conversations of which they are a part. Therefore, the chapter is a reflection on learning to learn as a framework on learning design system and the role of learners. If not so much that learners acquire structures or models to understand the world, but they participate in frameworks that have structure. Learning involves participation in a community of practice. The book will close with summary of the key findings and future directions, how to evaluate to facilitate learning, how to support the development of students' key competence learning to learn, namely the right of power learning, as help people plan their personal and professional future by identifying and assessing results of their learning and skills, are among the challenges is to addressing the education and training system. And that is a terrible sentence that really needed to be reworked. Somebody should have edited that. To meet these challenges, it must be reconsidered globally the ratio of evaluation procedures, guidance, and teaching learning. In recent years, there has been a profound rethinking of the evaluation mode teaching. However, is still inadequate dissemination among the teachers, skills methodological and operational in the field of learning assessment. They must be improved as necessary in view of a new teaching, that it is centered on meta, competence, learning to learn, understood both as a regulator, function learning of character as both in turn competence, result of a learning process that evolves throughout the life cycle, and in different contexts learning. In addition, help to explain the elements that connects in a learning to learn continuum, teaching guidance and orientation training, but also to the professional orientation per se, may be an additional tangible contribution to the development of learner-centered teaching, effective and appropriate to the stage to accompany the individual throughout life. A school, as a learning organization, has a shared vision that gives it a sense of direction and serves as a motivating force for sustained action to achieve individual and school goals. Having a shared vision is more an outcome of a process than it is a starting point, a process that involves all staff, students, parents, and other stakeholders. One of the biggest challenges facing communities today is integrating those on the margins of society whose learning difficulties undermine their self-confidence. Not only is their exclusion a waste of human potential, their alienation poses a real threat to democracy. Education stakeholders need to believe that a school's vision and goals include a moral purpose. Having an inspiring and motivating vision statement that is committed to enhancing the lives of all students is vitally important. Success in school is possible for all students. Many schools and education systems around the globe have realized their vision to dramatically improve the learning outcomes of the most disadvantaged children. PISA 2012, for example, shows that the countries that have improved student performance significantly since 2000, including Brazil, Germany, Greece, Italy, Mexico, Tunisia, and Turkey, have managed to reduce the proportion of low achieving students. The evidence shows that excellence and equity in education are not mutually exclusive goals. Thus, any vision to transform a school into a learning organization that is able to support learning to learn processes should include two things: a front and center commitment to making a difference in the learning and lives of all students. And then I think we just have references here, scrolling down. Yes. Okay, so I'm not going to read those. You can check those out. I'll put a link in the description to this article. It's a very good article. There, as I say, it may have been translated from another language or something. There are some issues with grammar and some of the sentence structure is not good. I've done this for 30 years, reading all kinds of papers. So it's just something that's automatic for me. But it is actually very well written in most areas. There were a few spots that were a bit wobbly, but the ideas are excellent. I really do like the ideas of helping students uh, learn to learn. I think that's a very effective way of, and also including all students and getting students who, because everybody has difficulties in certain areas, right? Where none of us professionals in every single area, but some have, more general issues, and they need help in getting engaged and learning. But even students who are incredibly bright, we often think of the students who are struggling as those who maybe have some cognitive issues or whatever. But it isn't always. There's students, and I know because I've taught some of them, I've tutored some of them in my private tutoring service, who are very intelligent, far more intelligent than I am. And I mean, I did okay in school and I did great at university and I love learning, I enjoy learning, but they are much, much more intelligent than I am, some of them. And yet some of them have had trouble at school and in some cases almost failing. And well, why is that? Well, part of it is they're not engaged, they're not being challenged, or they don't feel part of the community, or there's different factors for every student. Every person's an individual, so there are different factors. But just because you have a high IQ or you're very, very intelligent, and I have issues with the IQ testing anyway, there's lots of problems with that, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have an easy time of it. And just because maybe you're not very strong in some areas of learning doesn't mean that you're going to have a really tough time. You might be a very social person who can pick up a lot of cues from other people, and that, even though maybe in terms of reading texts or understanding complex concepts, immediately you might struggle, but you can do it in another way. You can find other pathways to get there. So every individual is different, and we need to find ways as much as we can to include all of them to fit into the learning process. And I agree that all students can learn in schools, but I don't agree that all schools are right for every student. I think that sometimes the school may be okay, but you may need to switch teachers. Not every teacher is good for every student. There's not always a match, and that's not always the solution. In fact, most of the time it probably isn't. You do need to learn from teachers who maybe you don't like. That's just a learning process as well. But sometimes the fit just isn't there. And maybe sometimes this institutional school isn't the right fit for a little while either. And that's where homeschool can sometimes be a help, although I have issues with that too sometimes. But certainly private tutors can be helpful. It's not as a replacement to school, but as an addition, as an assistance to school. Or a different school. Sometimes that we have schools that are specialized in certain areas, or will take on students who have particular issues. So you might have to do that too. So I thought the article was excellent. I am going to stop the share here just so I come back to the big screen. Let me know what you think. I know it's a bit of a long video, kind of a longer article than what I usually do, but because it's about learning to learn, I thought it was very important. Do not forget to check down below for a link to my book, Teach Myself, Teach Myself. It's not a very long read, but it is a consolidation of a lot of things that I've taught my students over many, many years, and I taught myself as well, even before that. So it really does, I think, help many, many students. We have all about reading, setting up a schedule, listening, very important, asking questions. I mentioned that in the article, reading for pleasure, being curious, note taking, writing for fun, all dreaded essay, a word about grades, humor. There's a lot more, but I don't want to bore you. Maybe I'd make a separate video again about that. I think I did one a long time ago when it first came out. But do check that out and check out for other links. If you're planning on taking any of my Udemy courses, don't forget to request a coupon for a huge savings. I can send you a coupon. Just shoot me an email. If you're interested in my private tutoring, if you're local, of course, I do it here at the big table, but we can do online tutoring as well. And you just send me a note, email, and I can set up a free information meeting for you, either in person if you're local or online if you're not, or even online if you're local. It doesn't matter. We can do it either way. All right, after all that, I have to go and have a cup of tea now. It is Ron from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like if you liked the video, and let me know in the comments. Other than that, keep learning, keep having fun. Until next time, bye-bye for now.